Why was she the only one not speaking at the briefing table? The colonel's words filled the room like gravel in a tin can, rough, rattling, never soft. He slammed a finger against the satellite photos projected on the wall. Routes, enemy movements, the cold skeleton of the mission. But she didn't say a word. She never did. Her silence had been noticed before, whispered about in barracks and behind thin canvas walls. Some called it arrogance. Others thought it was trauma. Maybe both. She didn't correct them. She had no words to give them. Only a silence heavy with unbroken strength. Tonight it weighed more than usual. The men shifted in their seats. A chair scraped. Pens tapped. The colonel droned on, outlining the extraction of a captured operative, a task simple in theory but blood-soaked in practice. And she sat there, the only woman in the room, watching the map with eyes that never flinched. Not from arrogance, not from trauma, but from a memory that was hers alone. A memory of someone who had once whispered across a campfire, "You don't need to talk, you just need to come back." That voice was gone now, buried halfway across the world, and every mission since had been her attempt to keep that promise silently, without breaking. The colonel's voice broke through her haze. "Martinez, you'll lead the overwatch." Her head lifted, eyes sharp. No salute, just a nod. The men around the table glanced at her, half in doubt, half in relief. None of them wanted the overwatch. Too much weight in one trigger pull, too much silence in one position. But she didn't argue, didn't flinch, she stood. And without a word, walked out of the briefing. The night air hit her like cold steel. Desert wind carrying sand across the tarmac, scratching against her skin. She inhaled slowly, letting it sting. It reminded her she was still here. The rifle was already waiting in the armory, wiped clean, scope calibrated, every screw tightened by her own hand. She traced a finger over the stock. The wood felt warmer than her own skin. This was the only conversation she allowed herself, the sound of a bolt sliding home, the metallic kiss of a magazine locking in place. She didn't hear the footsteps until they stopped behind her. Martinez. It was Pierce, the youngest of the unit, barely 23, still carrying the smell of civilian life in his voice. Nervous, always trying too hard to fill silence with words. "You ever think about what it'll be like, taking a shot that saves us all?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I mean, knowing it's on you." She looked at him once, just once. Her silence made him shuffle. "Right, dumb question." He scratched the back of his neck, then lowered his voice. "I had a sister before she got sick. She used to sit with me on the porch and not say anything, just sit. Sometimes that meant more than talking." For a moment, Martinez's hands froze on the rifle. Something flickered across her face, so fast Pierce almost thought he imagined it. She didn't answer, she never did. But when she walked past him, her silence felt less like stone and more like acknowledgement. Dawn. The convoy moved out under the thin blush of early light. Engines low, tires crunching gravel. Every man carried noise, muttered prayers, dry jokes, radio chatter. Only she carried silence. On the ridgeline, she lay prone, rifle steady, heartbeat slower than the ticking second hand in her wristwatch. Below, the others moved like ants across the dust. The mission had begun. Her eye pressed against the scope, crosshairs floating, every movement magnified, every breath slowed. Then a shadow. Her finger froze just above the trigger. Someone was out there, watching, waiting. She saw it, a glint, a scope, another sniper. And just like that, the weight of silence pressed harder against her chest. Not fear, not panic, just the reminder of the promise she carried. You just need to come back. But to keep that promise, someone else might not. Her jaw clenched, fingers settled. The silence around her thickened, wrapping her like a shroud. She exhaled, and the desert held its breath. Why was she the only one not speaking at the briefing table? The colonel's voice filled the tent like gravel in a tin can, harsh, rattling, scraping against every ear. He stabbed a finger at the satellite photos projected on the canvas wall. Routes, suspected hideouts, supply lines traced in red, the cold skeleton of a mission that was about to turn flesh and blood. Around the table, men shifted in their seats. A chair scraped, a pen tapped, boots scuffed against plywood flooring. Their questions came sharp and constant, angles, timings, contingencies, trying to cut through the fog of uncertainty. But she stayed silent. She always did. Some had grown used to it. Others whispered behind her back in barracks, in chow lines, under the cover of cigarettes and fatigue. Some said she was arrogant. Some swore she was broken. Nobody ever asked her outright. Nobody really wanted to. Her silence made them uncomfortable. But tonight, the weight of it was heavier than usual. The colonel's tone was matter-of-fact, almost mechanical. Extraction is scheduled for 0300. Target location confirmed, compound perimeter here, guard rotations here. He drew lines with the blunt end of a pointer, like a surgeon dissecting something already dead. The only problem was, nothing about this mission was dead. Not yet. They were going in for one of their own. An operative captured 3 weeks prior. No one said it out loud, but they all knew what that meant. Time was sand running out. 3 weeks was already too long. Martinez, the colonel said suddenly, his voice breaking through the haze of her thoughts. You'll lead the overwatch. Her head lifted, a slight nod, nothing more, no salute, no words. The others glanced at her, half in doubt, half in relief. None of them wanted overwatch. Too much weight in one trigger pull, too much silence in one position. But she didn't argue, she didn't flinch. She closed her notebook blank as always and stood. Without a word, she walked out of the briefing. The night air hit her like cold steel. Desert wind carried fine grit across the tarmac, sand whispering against her cheeks, scratching her skin. She inhaled deeply, letting the sting remind her she was still here, still alive. The armory lights buzzed faintly overhead, painting the walls in a sterile glow. Her rifle was already waiting, cleaned, calibrated, the scope's glass polished to clarity. She traced a finger along the stock, the ridges and grooves familiar under her skin. The wood felt warmer than her own flesh, like it carried a pulse of its own. This was the only conversation she allowed herself anymore. The metallic click of a bolt sliding home, the satisfying kiss of a magazine locking in place, the small, mechanical certainties of a weapon she trusted more than words. Footsteps approached, slow, hesitant. Martinez. She turned slightly, eyes narrowing just enough to recognize the voice. It was Pierce, the youngest on the team, barely 23. His uniform still carried the stiffness of new fabric, his voice the faint echoes of civilian life. Nervous, always filling silence with words, like he was afraid of what quiet might reveal. He leaned against the doorframe, pretending not to fidget. You ever think about it? I mean, knowing the shot is on you, the one that decides if we all make it out. He forced a smile. That's a lot to carry. She looked at him once, just once. Her silence made him shuffle, his hands slipping into his pockets. Right, dumb question, he muttered, scratching the back of his neck. His voice dropped. I had a sister before she got sick. She used to sit with me on the porch, not say anything, just sit. Sometimes that meant more than talking, you know. Something flickered across Martinez's face. So brief Pierce almost thought he imagined it, a tightening around the eyes, a breath that caught and vanished. But she didn't answer, she never did. When she walked past him, though, the silence she carried wasn't sharp or cold. It felt softer, like acknowledgement. It was the closest thing to a conversation he'd ever get. Sleep never came that night. Not fully. The hum of generators outside the tent, the low murmur of men turning in their bunks, the distant thud of helicopters cycling, all of it blended into a restless haze. Martinez lay awake, eyes on the canvas ceiling, replaying the briefing in her head. Not the colonel's words, not the map, something else. The memory of a voice. You don't need to talk, you just need to come back. The words belonged to someone buried halfway across the world. Someone who had once sat across a campfire with her, their faces washed in amber light, speaking in fragments between long silences. Someone she had promised to return to, a promise broken before it could be kept. Since then, silence had become her shield, her anchor, her way of carrying them forward. She closed her eyes, and when they opened again, it was dawn. The convoy moved out beneath a sky still bruised with fatting night. Engines low, headlights cut, tires crunching against gravel. Dust swirled in the early light, clinging to uniforms, to skin, to the cracks in their weapons. Each man carried noise, muttered prayers, half-jokes, last-minute checks over the radio. Only she carried silence. The ridgeline loomed ahead, jagged against the pale horizon. It was hers alone. She broke off from the convoy, boots sinking into loose dirt, climbing higher until the world below stretched into a battlefield of possibility. Prone on the ridge, rifle steady, cheek pressed to the stock. Her heartbeat slowed, calmer than the ticking second hand of her wristwatch. Through the scope, the convoy moved like ants across the dust. The men below became pieces of a fragile machine, each one depending on her silence, on her steadiness. Her finger hovered near the trigger, breathing measured, crosshairs drifting with the rhythm of her lungs. Then movement. A shadow against the far slope. Her pulse jumped, then settled again. Slowly, carefully, she adjusted the scope. And there it was. A glint, a reflection of glass. Another sniper. Watching them, waiting. Her breath caught in her throat, the weight of silence pressing harder against her chest. Not fear, not panic, just the heavy reminder of the promise she carried. You just need to come back. But to keep that promise, someone else might not. Her jaw clenched. Her finger settled against the trigger, gentle but certain. The desert around her fell still. Even the wind seemed to pause. She exhaled. And in that moment, the world held its breath with her. Part 1 ends here, holding the silence on the edge of a shot. Later parts will open with the consequence of this decision, weaving her backstory, her unspoken grief, her fragile bond with Pierce, and the cost of silence into the mission's unfolding chaos. What if she missed? The thought cut sharper than the wind across the ridge. A sniper's greatest fear was not pulling the trigger, it was pulling it wrong. Martinez's finger rested on the curve of the trigger, not tense, not careless, balanced. Through the scope, the faint shimmer of sunlight against glass betrayed the other sniper's position. High ground, clever, patient. They hadn't fired yet, that was the worst part. Whoever they were waiting, watching, calculating the same way she was. A duel in silence. She slowed her breathing, 3 counts in, 3 counts out. Her body disappeared into the earth beneath her, heartbeat steady, pulse quiet enough to vanish. One squeeze and she could end it, protect the team below, fulfill the role they had thrust onto her shoulders. But what if she missed? The convoy rumbled forward, unaware of the predator's gaze hovering above them. They trusted her, though they'd never say it out loud. They depended on her silence, her steadiness. And then, in the span of a heartbeat, the decision was gone. The figure vanished from her scope. She blinked, adjusted, nothing, just scrub brush and rocks. Her lips pressed thin. The glint had been real, she knew it, but the enemy had withdrawn, slipping into the land like a shadow. That was worse than a bullet. Because now, every step forward was a question mark. The convoy reached its dismount point. Boots hit dirt, weapons raised, radios clicked, orders whispered. The skeleton of the mission turned into muscle, sinew, flesh. Martinez stayed above them, her rifle following their path, the land stretching into a canvas of possibilities. Through the scope, She saw every detail magnified, the furrow of brows, the strain in shoulders, the faint tremor in Pierce's hand as he adjusted his grip. She noticed it because she was trained to notice. She noticed it because she had once been him. Young, raw, carrying more ghosts than bullets. The memory came uninvited. Her first mission, a jungle, not a desert, humidity thick as breath, her hands shaking so badly the rifle nearly slipped. Back then she still spoke, still answered questions, still laughed sometimes when laughter felt like a rebellion against fear. And then the ambush. The details blurred. The firefight was noise and chaos, but the silence afterward was clear. A friend on the ground, eyes open, unmoving. She had promised him she'd come back. But she hadn't brought him with her. After that, words had failed her, died in her throat. Silence became easier. Easier than explaining why she had survived when he hadn't. Overwatch status. The radio crackled in her ear. Martinez adjusted the scope, finger against the earpiece. She pressed the transmit button twice, 2 sharp clicks, their code for all clear. No words, just sound. That was enough. The squad moved, ghosts in daylight, low to the ground, rifles angled, eyes sweeping every shadow. The compound lay ahead, a cluster of mud walls, patched with sheet metal, surrounded by makeshift watchtowers. Primitive but not careless. Martinez's scope swept the perimeter. One guard smoking, lazy. Another packing, restless. 2 more near the gate, rifles slung, posture bored but eyes sharp. She tracked each one, measured distance, calculated wind, stored them like notches in her mind. Her finger hovered near the trigger. 1 shot could drop the smoker, 2 could clear the gate. But she waited. Her role was not to hunt freely. Her role was to be the line they never saw coming. And then she saw it. Movement in a tower window. She tightened the zoom. A face. Eyes bruised, swollen, lips cracked, hands tied. The captured operative. Alive. Her throat tightened. The others would need to know. But the radio felt heavy in her hand. Words pressed against her teeth and didn't come. Instead, she clicked the transmit twice, pause, then 3 times. Their code for target confirmed. Below she saw heads turn, a hand raised, the squad split, the plan unfurled. Pierce moved with the entry team. His young shoulders hunched lower than the rest, as if trying to disappear into the dirt. Through the scope, Martinez watched him wipe sweat from his forehead with the back of his glove. Small, human, a detail that made him feel painfully fragile in her sights. She tracked his every step. Because if the glint returned, if the hidden sniper struck, it would be Pierce or one of the others who paid the price. Her jaw locked. The mission pressed forward. The desert held its silence. Then, like glass shattering, it broke. Gunfire. From the gate, one of the board guards had spotted them. His rifle barked. The others scrambled. Shouts cut the air, sharp and guttural. Martinez's world narrowed. Her fingers squeezed. Crack. The guard dropped before his second shot left the barrel. Crack. The smoker slumped, cigarette tumbling from dead lips. Her breath stayed calm, steady, each exhale a metronome for death. But then, movement on the ridge opposite hers. The glint. Her blood iced. The other sniper was back. For 1 suspended second, she and the unseen figure mirrored each other across the valley. Both scopes aligned, both rifles steady, 2 lives balanced on a trigger's edge. Pierce broke the spell. He stumbled through the gate, returning fire, his body exposed in her peripheral vision. Her pulse spiked. The enemy sniper's scope shifted. Not at her. At him. She didn't think, didn't breathe. She fired. Crack. The bullet leapt across the valley, slicing air, bending distance. A figure dropped behind the rocks. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavier than ever. Then Pierce ducked into cover, alive. Martinez exhaled, slowly. The promise echoed again, softer this time. You just need to come back. But promises had weight, and as the squad fought deeper into the compound, she knew silence could only carry so much. Because what she hadn't told them, what she couldn't say out loud was this. She wasn't sure she wanted to come back. Not this time. Who was screaming? The sound ripped across the compound, high and raw, piercing through the cracks of gunfire. It wasn't English, not any language she knew, but fear spoke universally, a cry of alarm, a cry of pain. Martinez pressed her cheek against the stock of her rifle, eyes locked to the scope. From her perch, she saw the entry team breach the first wall, moving like shadows against the mud. She tracked them one by one, bodies bent low, rifles steady, every motion tight and deliberate. Then her sightline found Pierce. He had taken the rear position, covering the team's flank. His movements were sharp but not fluid. Hesitation clung to his shoulders. His finger jerked on the trigger, sending bullets wide. Too fast, too nervous. Her jaw tightened. She could almost feel his heartbeat from here. And she remembered her own. Another time, another place. A first mission when her hands shook so badly she could barely reload. Her spotter had laughed back then, not cruelly, just to calm her. Breathe, rookie, he'd said. The rifle doesn't need your panic, it needs your patience. But patience hadn't saved him. The memory burned, raw as an open wound. She blinked hard, forcing it down. Not now, not here. Crack. She fired. A guard collapsed just as he swung his rifle toward Pierce's exposed flank. Her finger held steady on the trigger. Pierce never even knew how close death had been. The compound erupted in chaos. Shouts bounced off walls. Gunfire stitched the air. The squad fanned out, sweeping from room to room, chasing shadows through narrow doorways. Through the scope, Martinez provided her rhythm of silence. Each shot precise. Each exhale controlled. Guards fell before their screams could fully leave their throats. But the more she killed, the heavier the silence felt inside her chest. Because no one would ever see it. No one would ever hear her voice claiming the lives she'd taken, or the ones she'd saved. And maybe that was better. Maybe some things should stay buried in silence. Overwatch status. The radio cracked in her ear, pulling her back. Her fingers tapped the transmit button twice, clear. But even as she gave the signal, her gut twisted. It wasn't clear, not entirely. Something was wrong. She scanned the ridges again. Every rock, every shadow. The enemy sniper she dropped earlier was gone. No body, no blood, just absence. Her stomach turned. She had hit the shot she knew she had, but absence meant only one thing. They weren't alone out here. Inside the compound, the captured operative had been found. Through the scope, Martinez caught glimpses of him being pulled from a dark room, wrists raw, face swollen. Alive, barely. The sight should have steadied her. Instead, it cracked something open. Because she saw another face in his. The man she hadn't brought back, the one she had promised. She could almost hear his voice again. You don't need to talk, you just need to come back. Her breath hitched. For a moment the scope blurred. She blinked hard, forcing the world back into focus. Below, Pierce moved to help the operative walk. The kid's arm went under the prisoner's shoulders, steadying him, guiding him forward. Too much weight for someone so young, but he carried it anyway. Martinez's throat tightened. There was something painfully familiar about the sight of him. Carrying someone else's survival like it was his own responsibility. Something she knew all too well. Gunfire cracked from the far wall. The squad ducked, returning fire. Martinez swung the scope, finger quick. Crack, crack, 2 men fell. But then, out of the corner of her scope, movement again. The ridge opposite. Another glint. Another sniper. Her chest seized. How many were there? She shifted quickly, centering the crosshairs. But this one didn't stay still. They were moving, darting from rock to rock, using the landscape like a second skin. Her finger twitched, but she held back. Too far, too fast. And in that hesitation, a shot rang out. Her stomach dropped. Not at her. At them. Through the scope, she saw Pierce stumble. His helmet spun from the impact, dust exploding around him. He fell hard, dragging the prisoner with him. Pierce's hit. Someone shouted over the radio, voice cracking. Martinez's chest tightened so hard it felt like her ribs might break. Her finger curled around the trigger. Crack. She fired at the ridge, missed. The sniper vanished behind cover. Crack. She fired again, sparks off rock, nothing else. She sucked air through clenched teeth. Her silence felt like it was suffocating her now. Below, 2 men dragged Pierce into cover, the prisoner still clutching to life. Martinez's hand trembled against the rifle, just slightly. Not now, not now. The radio exploded with noise, shouts, orders, panic threading through the voices. She didn't answer, couldn't. Her silence had always been her strength, but right now it felt like a prison. Because the one thing she wanted, the one thing burning inside her chest, was to call his name. To say, hold on. But no words came. Only breath. Only silence. The squad began pulling back, prisoner in tow. Martinez covered them, her scope scanning every rooftop, every shadow, every window that could hide death. But the ridgeline opposite stayed quiet. Too quiet. She knew they were out there, watching, waiting. The silence pressed heavier than ever, like a storm building with no release. And in that silence, a thought surfaced, one she hadn't allowed herself to feel until now. What if she had already failed? Not the mission, not the colonel. Failed herself. Because no matter how many she killed, no matter how many she saved, she still hadn't found her voice. And maybe she never would. The prisoner was loaded into the convoy. Pierce lay beside him, pale but conscious, his hand gripping the stretcher frame like it was the only thing tethering him to earth. Martinez kept her rifle trained outward, her silence steady, her heartbeat sharp. But her mind screamed louder than the gunfire ever had. Because for the first time since that promise had been made across a campfire, she wasn't sure she could keep it. Not for him. Not for herself. Not anymore. Why wasn't the convoy moving faster? Every second dragged like an anchor, every turn of the wheel too slow. Dust rose behind them, marking their path like a beacon for anyone watching. From her perch, Martinez tracked the convoy through her scope. Trucks rattled over uneven ground, suspension squealing under the weight of men, weapons, and one fragile life stretched across a stretcher. Pierce. She had watched him stumble under enemy fire, watched the helmet fly from his head, watched the dirt swallow him whole. Now she watched him through the narrow slit of glass in the truck's rear, pale and still, his chest rising shallow. Her finger tapped unconsciously against the stock of her rifle, a rhythm she couldn't break. Tab, tab, tab. Like a clock counting down. Overwatch status. The radio buzzed in her ear, a voice she half recognized, ragged with adrenaline. She pressed the transmit button twice, clear. It wasn't true. The ridgeline opposite still clawed at her mind. The glint, the shadow, the sniper who had vanished but hadn't been finished. She could feel them out there, silent as she was. The difference was, their silence had a bullet ready. The convoy reached a shallow wadi, a dry riverbed carved into the desert floor. The trucks groaned as they dipped low, tires grinding against loose stone. It was cover for now, a place to stop to breathe. Engines cut, doors slammed. The silence that followed was too heavy. Martinez descended from her ridge, boots sliding on gravel, rifle slung against her chest. She approached the vehicles like a ghost, unannounced, unwelcomed, but expected all the same. Inside the truck, Pierce lay with his vest cut open. Blood soaked the bandage pressed against his shoulder, seeping through fingers that tried to hold it back. "Pressure, keep pressure," one of the medics muttered, voice clipped, desperate. Pierce's eyes fluttered. They caught hers. For a moment, the noise of everything else fell away. He tried to speak. His lips moved, forming her name. But she didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat closed like a fist, choking off words before they could surface. She held his gaze instead, steady and unbroken, like a wall he could lean against. Maybe that was enough. Around them, the squad muttered in low tones. Men checked weapons, reloaded magazines, spat curses into the dirt. Didn't see them coming. Sniper out there somewhere. We move now, we're bait. Stay, we're sitting ducks. Their voices rose, colliding, overlapping. And through it all, her silence sat like a stone in the middle of the circle. "Martinez," the lieutenant barked, turning to her. "Direction." She froze. Every eye landed on her, expectation sharp, impatient. She lifted the rifle, pointed back toward the ridgeline, a slow, deliberate motion. The lieutenant frowned. "That's it." She nodded once. A murmur rippled through the men. Some shook their heads. One spat in the dirt. She didn't flinch. Her silence had cost her their trust long ago. All she had left to offer was clarity in action. The medic cursed again. "He needs a vac." The lieutenant's jaw clenched. "We're not in range for air." "Then get us moving." "Not till we know the ridge is clear." The standoff hung heavy, time bleeding, Pierce's blood soaking into the stretcher. Martinez dropped to her stomach, rifle sliding into place, scope sweeping the jagged skyline. She waited. The desert breathed. A bird circled overhead, wings stretched wide against the sun. And then there. A flicker of movement, a shadow slipping between rocks. Her breath caught, her finger curled. Crack! The rifle barked, echo rolled. But no body fell. The shadow vanished. Her heart pounded against her ribs, harder than it should. She had never missed like this before. The lieutenant's voice cracked. "What the hell did you see?" She didn't answer, didn't look away from the scope. Because she knew the truth. The sniper wasn't running, they were hunting. And silence wasn't protection anymore. It was bait. The convoy moved again, slower this time, hugging the contours of the wadi. Martinez stayed outside the trucks, walking alongside with her rifle raised, boots crunching against loose stone. Dust clung to her lips, to her lashes. Sweat rolled down her spine, caught in the fabric of her vest. But she didn't feel it. All she felt was the weight of eyes she couldn't see. She remembered another weight once, her first friend's body in her arms, heat bleeding away, silence pressing down so hard she couldn't breathe. That was when she had stopped speaking. Because what could words do against loss that final? Nothing. So she had buried them. And yet now, watching Pierce's chest rise in shallow breaths inside the truck, she wondered if silence was enough anymore. The road narrowed ahead, squeezing the convoy between steep walls of stone. An ambush point. Every man knew it. Every man's eyes darted, fingers flexing against triggers, breaths shallow and quick. The lieutenant's voice rasped through the radio. "Overwatch anything." Martinez lifted her scope, scanned the heights, rocks, dust, sky. Nothing. Her finger hesitated on the transmit button. She wanted to say something, anything. Wanted to warn them, to tell them silence wasn't safety, that danger lived in quiet more than in gunfire. Her throat tightened. But no words came. She clicked twice, clear. And the convoy rolled forward. The first explosion tore the earth open. A flash, a roar, dust swallowing trucks whole. Men shouted, scattered, dove for cover. Gunfire followed, spilling from the ridges, echoing down into the wadi like thunder rolling through stone. Martinez hit the dirt, rifle snapping to her shoulder. Through the scope she saw muzzle flashes, shapes moving, enemy positions dug into the high ground. She squeezed crack, one fell crack another. But they were too many. The convoy was pinned. Pierce's stretcher tumbled from the truck, medics scrambling to drag him behind cover. His face twisted in pain, lips moving, trying to say something. She couldn't hear him, couldn't read his lips through the dust. And even if she could, she had no words to answer. The lieutenant shouted over the roar, "We need to move, Martinez, cover." She fired again, each shot precise, controlled, bodies dropping from the ridge. But it wasn't enough. For everyone she killed, 2 more rose. Her silence felt like a scream trapped in her chest. And for the first time in years, she wanted to break it. Wanted to shout, to command, to beg. But her throat locked. The only sound that came was the rifle's bark. Crack, crack, crack. Until the magazine clicked empty. And the enemy kept coming. The air was a storm of dust and fire. Gunfire shredded the wadi walls, sparking against stone, punching through steel. Trucks burned, belching smoke that curled black against the sky. Men crouched low, faces streaked with grit, eyes wide with fear. And in the middle of it, Martinez moved like the only steady rhythm in chaos. Crack. Shift. Crack. Her rifle barked, each shot placed with surgical calm. She tracked targets by instinct now, following muzzle flashes before her brain could name them. Her finger squeezed, released, squeezed again, carving breathing space for men below. A voice screamed through the comms, "Left side, left side." She swung her scope, saw them advancing, 5 figures darting down the slope, rifles flashing. Crack, 2 fell, crack, a third crumpled. The last 2 kept coming. Reloading, someone yelled, panic high and sharp. Martinez slid her last magazine into place, fired twice. Both dropped before their boots hit the wadi floor. Her chest heaved, her lips pressed thin. The men below shouted, scrambled, fired wildly, their noise rising and falling like a tide. But not hers. Her silence was the only constant. And it was eating her alive. Pierce lay under the shade of a half-collapsed truck, stretcher dragged into makeshift cover. His face was pale, almost gray, sweat gleaming across his brow. His breath came shallow, ragged. "Pressure, damn it, keep pressure," the medic shouted, hands slick with blood. Pierce's eyes flickered open. He looked at Martinez, found her silhouette through the smoke and fire, rifle raised, jaw locked. He tried to speak again. His lips shaped something soft, desperate. Her name. But she couldn't answer. Her throat was stone. So she fired instead. Crack, a body fell, crack, another. Her voice remained buried, and with every bullet, the weight of that silence grew heavier. The lieutenant crawled into cover near her, shouting into his radio. "Command, we're pinned in Sector Delta 9. Repeat, we're." Static drowned him out. He slammed the radio against the dirt. "Nothing, they're jamming us." His gaze snapped to Martinez. "Options." Her scope swept the ridges again. She counted positions, muzzle flashes, movement in the dust. She saw where they were thickest, saw where the fire thinned, saw the gaps small, dangerous, but real. She raised her hand, pointed. The lieutenant followed her finger, his eyes narrowed. "That gap." She nodded once. He hesitated, lips curling in doubt. "If you're wrong." She didn't move, didn't blink. Her silence was certainty. He growled and pushed off the dirt, waving to the men. "Form on me. Martinez covers, we push through the east gap." The squad shifted, scrambling into tighter formation. Gunfire hammered against stone, louder now, as if the enemy sensed the change. Martinez pressed her cheek to the stock, scope fixed on the east ridge. Her breath slowed, her heart steadied. Crack, crack, crack. 3 bodies fell in sequence, clearing the way for the first truck to lurch forward. The engine roared, tires spinning, bouncing over loose stone. Gunfire sparked against its hood, but it forced through, pushing toward the gap. The second truck followed, men firing from windows, shouting hoarse over the noise. Martinez laid down cover, shots sharp and relentless. Her world narrowed to targets and angles, dust and blood. She was silent, but her rifle spoke for her. The gap widened as the convoy pushed. Hope sparked. Then the explosion came. The lead truck hit a mine buried in the dirt. The blast lifted it off the ground, fireball ripping the sky apart. Metal shrieked, bodies flung, screams cutting through the roar. The wreck slammed back into the wadi floor, burning, blocking the path. The gap was gone. The convoy was trapped again. The men froze, eyes wide, momentum shattered. Back, back, the lieutenant screamed, voice raw, find cover. But they had nowhere left to go. The enemy fire rained harder, relentless. Bullets punched into steel, ricocheted off stone, tore into flesh. A man fell beside Martinez, chest blooming red. Another crawled, dragging himself by one arm, leaving a streak in the dust. The lieutenant cursed, rage breaking into fear. His eyes snapped to her again, desperate now. Martinez ideas. Her mouth opened, her chest heaved. She wanted to say it, to shout it. Flank west, push hard, take the ridge from the side before they bury us here. The words screamed in her skull, tearing at her throat. But nothing came out. Her silence chained her, dragged her down, left her starring. The lieutenant's face twisted. Damn it, say something. She raised her rifle instead, fired. Another enemy dropped. It wasn't enough. The medic's voice cut through, ragged and breaking. He's fatting, I can't keep him. Martinez's scope snapped toward Pierce. His chest barely moved now. His skin was waxen, lips tinged blue. Her breath caught. Her vision blurred for a moment, heat pricking her eyes. She couldn't lose him. Not like before. Not in silence. She turned back to the ridges, rage pushing her faster, harder. Crack, crack, crack. Her rifle spat fire, each shot more violent than the last. Bodies fell, but there were always more. And she knew she couldn't shoot her way out of this. She had to speak. But the words stayed buried. The lieutenant staggered to her side again, dirt streaking his face, blood soaking his sleeve. They're closing in, he shouted. West side, 2 squads moving down. She saw it through her scope, shadows darting lower, rifles raised, closing like wolves. Her silence burned. If she said nothing, they'd all die here. The convoy, the men, Pierce. Her hands shook, her lips parted. But no sound came. Her throat betrayed her again. So she fired instead, eyes wet, vision trembling, bullets snapping against stone. Her rifle barked louder, faster, emptier. Click. The bolt locked back. Empty. And for the first time, she had nothing left to say, not even in bullets. The west squads closed in, rifles glinting, dust swirling around them. The lieutenant's voice cracked, "We're finished." The medic shouted over him, "He's gone if we don't move now." And Martinez, silent, weapon empty, throat raw with words that wouldn't come, stared at Pierce through the haze. His eyes met hers one last time. Weak plating. And she realized the truth she had buried all along. Her silence wasn't strength anymore. It was killing them. Was he breathing? Martinez couldn't tell. The medic's hands pressed hard against Pierce's chest, frantic, trembling. Blood seeped through bandages faster than they could hold. His eyes had rolled back once for too long before flickering forward again, glassy and faint. Her rifle lay across her lap, empty, the magazine well yawning like a hollow mouth. She tried to reload. Her hands shook. She had no rounds left. Her silence pressed against her ribs like a vice. All around, the firefight raged, men shouting, bullets cracking, stones shattering, engines whining as trucks shifted hopelessly against burning wreckage. But it all blurred into a low, muffled roar, because all she could hear was the pulse in her own ears. And the question burning through her mind: had she already lost him? Time folded. She wasn't in the wadi anymore. She was in that village, years ago. Her first mission gone wrong. The day she learned silence. She saw herself crouched in rubble, rifle pressed against her cheek, crosshairs trembling as they fixed on a doorway. Her spotter, older, steady, kind, lay beside her. He had a grin even in hell. "Easy," he'd whispered. "One shot, breathe it out." But she had frozen. Her breath too shallow, her finger too heavy. The figure in the doorway had raised a rifle first. The shot came, but not from her. Her spotter took it instead. The round hit him high, tearing through his throat. She remembered the sound, not his voice, but the sudden lack of it, the gurgling silence where laughter had lived. She had screamed then, a raw, broken sound. But no one had heard. And when the report came, they said she hadn't spoken at all. They said she had gone quiet. That quiet stuck. It had become her shield, her prison. Now in the wadi, staring at Pierce's fatting body, she realized she was still there. Still frozen. Still silent. And this time, if she didn't break free, she would lose him too. The lieutenant crawled beside her, blood across his temple, eyes wild. "Martinez, they're flanking west, we can't hold. What's the move?" She stared at him, her lips parted. The words rose like fire up her chest, desperate, violent. "Flank them first. Take the ridge. Move now or we're all dead." But her throat closed. Nothing came out. Her silence screamed louder than gunfire. The lieutenant cursed, slammed his fist into the dirt. "Damn it, say something." But she couldn't. She just shook her head, hands trembling. The weight of years crushed her lungs, choked her words before they lived. Then Pierce's hand moved. Barely, just enough to reach for her. His fingers brushed the air, searching, weak. She caught them without thinking, pressed his hand in both of hers, tight, desperate. His lips moved. No sound came, but she could read it. "Don't let go." And something inside her cracked. She looked around, at the squad pressed to dirt, waiting, at the medic crying curses under his breath, at the lieutenant's face carved with anger and fear, at Pierce fatting in her grip. Her silence had carried her this far. But now silence was death. Her chest heaved, her throat burned. The words clawed up again. This time she didn't stop them. Her voice tore out, hoarse, cracked but real. "West Ridge." The sound cut the chaos. It was small, raw, broken, but it was hers. The lieutenant snapped his head to her, eyes wide. She swallowed, breath shaking, and forced it again, louder. "Flank west, push the ridge now." For a moment, no one moved. The silence after her voice was thicker than the battlefield noise. Then the lieutenant nodded, shouting to the men. "You heard her, flank west, move." The squad surged. Rifles raised, boots pounding, they shifted formation, pouring toward the side slope. Gunfire lit the ridge as enemy fighters tried to hold, but now they were the ones off balance. Martinez scrambled to her knees, grabbing a fallen rifle beside her, slammed a fresh mag home. She raised it, fired blind bursts, covering her squad's push. Her voice tore again, raw but real. "Go, keep moving." Each word was jagged, unnatural. Her throat scraped like it had forgotten how to shape sound. But she spoke anyway. And the men followed. The West Ridge fight was brutal. Shouts, screams, stones shattering as grenades burst against rock. Martinez fired until her shoulder bruised, each recoil a jolt through her bones. Her silence cracked wider with every word she forced out, short, sharp, broken orders. Left side. Cover him. Clear the wall. They weren't perfect, they weren't even loud. But they were enough. The squad clawed up the slope, forcing enemy fighters back step by step. Bodies tumbled down, dust rising in plumes. And for the first time since that first death years ago, Martinez felt her silence break like glass. Painful, sharp, but freeing. Minutes stretched into hours. The ridge finally cleared, enemy fire thinning, then fatting. The squad stood bloodied but alive, rifles aimed outward, controlling the high ground at last. Below, the convoy roared back to life, engines revving, wheels spinning. The medic still bent over Pierce, but there was a flicker of hope in his voice now. Got a pulse, weak but he's holding. Martinez staggered to the edge of the ridge, chest heaving, throat raw. She looked down at Pierce, at his still form, at the medic's frantic hands, and her breath caught. He was alive. Because she had finally spoken. Her knees buckled. She sank against the rocks, rifle heavy across her lap, dust clinging to her sweat. She closed her eyes. For the first time in years, silence wasn't her enemy. It was just silence. And her voice, broken, small, imperfect, had been enough. How quiet could a battlefield be? Martinez had never known silence like this. The gunfire was gone, the shouting too. Even the engines idled low, their growl a background hum instead of a roar. The ridge beneath her boots was slick with dust and blood, hot stone radiating the sun's burn. The men stood scattered, rifles slack in their hands, eyes sweeping the distance for threats that weren't there anymore. It was over. At least this part. She sank onto one knee, rifle heavy across her lap, chest still rising too fast. Her throat burned, raw from the words she'd torn out of herself, words she hadn't spoken in years. The sound of them still rang in her ears, louder than the gunfire had ever been. Below, the medic was bent over Pierce. His voice carried faintly up the slope. He's stable for now, but he won't stay that way unless we move. Martinez's chest tightened. She rose, legs shaky, and started down. The descent blurred stone under her boots, dust rising, men stepping aside without words. She passed them like a shadow, but they looked at her differently now. Not like before. Not like the quiet sniper who hovered at the edges of their world. Something had shifted. Respect, maybe confusion, maybe both. But no one said it out loud. They didn't need to. She reached the bottom and dropped beside the medic. Pierce lay on the stretcher, chest wrapped in bloody bandages, his face pale and slick with sweat. His lips trembled, whispering words too faint to catch. Martinez leaned closer. For a moment she thought she heard it again, her name. Her throat clenched. She wanted to answer, to tell him he wasn't alone. But her voice had burned itself raw. So she did what she'd always done. She squeezed his hand, tight and steady. And for the first time, maybe it was enough. The lieutenant crouched nearby, dirt streaking his face, blood seeping from a graze along his arm. His eyes locked on her, sharp, unreadable. "You spoke," he said finally. It wasn't a question. She met his gaze, saying nothing. He studied her, searching. Then he gave a small nod, almost to himself, and looked away. No praise, no questions, just acknowledgement. That was all she could take anyway. The squad moved slowly, gathering supplies, dragging wrecked bodies into shade, salvaging what they could from the destroyed truck. Martinez watched them, her silence holding something new now, not shame, not weakness. Just space. A breathing pause between one storm and the next. As the convoy regrouped, a private sat nearby, rifle across his knees, head bowed. He spoke softly, not to anyone in particular. "My brother used to write me letters," he said. "Said he'd keep the porch light on till I came home." No one answered. They just listened, each man folding into his own thoughts. Martinez felt the words slip into her chest. She had no porch light waiting, no letters. But she understood. Everyone here carried something they couldn't say. Some buried it in talk, some buried it in silence. She happened to choose the latter. Until now. The medic wiped sweat from his brow, glancing at her. He needs a vac. If we don't get him to base soon, he didn't finish. She looked at Pierce's still body. His fingers twitched faintly in hers. The promise rose in her chest again, the one she'd made long before tonight. Don't let go. Her silence whispered back, not this time. They loaded Pierce into the remaining truck, setting him against the wall. Medic pressed close, eyes never leaving the monitor strapped to his wrist. The engines rumbled louder now. Dust swirled as wheels crunched over rock. The convoy began to move. Martinez sat near the back, rifle across her knees, eyes scanning the ridges. Every shadow looked like a sniper, every glint a threat. Her body was exhausted, but her mind refused to let go. Because silence had a cost, and she had paid it once already. She wouldn't pay it again. The truck jolted over rough ground. The men inside swayed, silent, lost in thought. One fiddled with a rosary. Another traced lines into the dust with his boot. The lieutenant sat opposite Martinez, watching her. His gaze was steady but softer now. "You saved us," he said quietly. Her throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, to say it wasn't true, that it was the squad, not her. But the words wouldn't come. Not from silence this time. From choice. She lowered her eyes instead. And maybe that was answer enough. The medic's voice broke the stillness, pulse dropping again. "We need that bird now." Martinez's head snapped up. She leaned closer to Pierce, her hand gripping his again. His skin was colder now, his breath shallow. Her voice scraped out, broken, almost a whisper. "Stay with me." The men around her glanced up, startled, not at the words themselves, but at the fact she had spoken them. She didn't care. Because Pierce's hand twitched in hers, weak but there. And for the first time, she believed he might hold on. The convoy pushed into the night, headlights cutting narrow beams through the dust. The desert stretched wide and endless around them, silence heavy but not empty. Martinez kept her rifle steady, eyes scanning, ears tuned for every sound. Her throat still ached, her voice still trembled. But the silence didn't crush her anymore. Not tonight. Tonight silence was just silence. And her voice, fragile, cracked, was waiting beneath it. She didn't say a word when the helicopter lifted off. Just sat there, her rifle across her lap, the straps digging into her shoulders. The others looked at her once or twice, but they knew better than to ask. The mission was over. The compound was ashes. The hostages alive, not all of them, but enough, more than anyone expected. She had moved like a shadow through that place, her silence louder than orders. And now, in the wash of rotor blades, in the salt sting of sweat and smoke, she was still silent. No celebration, no relief, just the weight. The medic beside her muttered something under his breath. A prayer, a promise. She caught only fragments, but she respected it. He had patched the broken, carried the weak. His hand still trembled. The youngest soldier, sitting across from her, met her eyes. He wanted to speak, wanted to ask how she stayed so calm when everything fell apart. But her gaze told him everything. Don't waste words when silence can hold the truth. The landscape fell away beneath them. Villages, roads, rivers, each mile carried them further from the fire, closer to something else. But inside her the echoes stayed, the faces of those she couldn't save, the flash of a boy's eyes before the blast, the sound of boots running into darkness. She knew she'd carry them, not for days, for years, maybe forever. At the base, when the bird finally touched down, the commander came to meet them. He wanted a report, numbers, breakdowns. She gave him none. Just a steady look, her silence more honest than any tally sheet. Later, alone in the barracks, she sat on the edge of her bunk. The lights were dim. A single photo tucked in her pocket burned against her chest. She didn't take it out. She didn't need to. Her hand trembled once, just once. She pressed it flat against her thigh until it stilled. The door opened. The medic entered, nodded, and left something on the table. Tea, still warm. He didn't speak either. He didn't have to. She stared at the steam rising, curling into the night. Outside, the camp carried on. Voices, laughter, the clatter of plates. But inside her room, silence reigned. Not empty, not hollow, heavy, full. The kind of silence that holds scars. The kind of silence that carries the weight of choices. She leaned back against the wall, eyes closing for the first time in days. And as the quiet wrapped around her, the truth settled. She had no words left to give them. Only a silence heavy with unbroken strength. And sometimes that was enough. The screen fades. The story doesn't end with a cheer or a speech. It ends with that silence, steady, unshaken, lingering. Because strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply doesn't break.